Hey guys, welcome back. We are on episode 199. Can you believe it? I want to encourage you to leave a review with Apple Podcasts, because when you leave a review there, our podcast gets those raving reviews, which gets us noticed so that other educators can connect here and grow and learn from each other. And so you will have a little bonus prize if you leave a review between now and next week when we are on episode 200. So please go to Apple Podcasts right now, leave a review, and you will get a nice surprise. So today is my interview with Andrew Smith, our behavior expert. And we're going to be talking about what do you need to understand about trauma and how it affects your students. Because in the past, you may have already worked with students who have dealt with traumatic experiences or may have still been going through traumatic experiences. And if you have not, it's really a matter of when, because we have a lot of hurting students in our school. So, this episode will help you be better prepared to understand and support your students, because dealing with trauma can affect their ability to learn and interact with others. So, before we get started, hit that subscribe button, share this podcast, share this episode with other educators that you know. Welcome to Behavior Strategies for Class. I am Diane Bachman, your behavior paraprofessional with over 15 years of experience working in special education. And I'm so glad you're here, because I'll be teaching you about social emotional learning, behavior strategies, trauma-informed care, and more. So if you are tired of being frustrated and not knowing what to do with your students who have challenging and disruptive behavior, you're in the right place. Now, if you're ready to become more equipped to help your students learn and grow, let's listen in to today's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to Behavior Strategies for Class. This is our monthly chat with Andrew, and we are talking about trauma and how that affects your students in your classroom. And then how can you help those students, specifically those who are struggling that you know about, because some of your students you will not know their family history or what's going on. But to have the knowledge and understanding of what trauma is, how it can affect your students in class. So thanks so much for being here, Andrew.
Always a pleasure.
Perfect. So let's jump in. And what do teachers need to know about trauma?
Well, trauma is a huge thing. I'm doing my doctorate right now, and I have friends who are specializing in this as like they're doing their own research for it. It's a subject that you could spend hours and days and weeks
Yeah.
and obviously years studying and talking about. Um, at a nutshell, trauma is a process, usually not just a big event, and the reason why is because there's so much that trauma influences throughout somebody's life and their being. It has such an impact on so many different ways, and different for so many other people too. So it's so nuanced, um, that in your classroom, you're going to see lots of different presentations of it. So, um, let's go back to the ACEs, which is the adverse childhood experiences, right? There's been a
Uh-huh.
big push in a lot of districts. If you haven't gotten some, then you've at least heard some training or heard ACEs mentioned, and not talking about cards, right?
Yeah.
It's great when when you're playing some blackjack. It is not so great when it's something that's happened to you as a child. So the
Right.
ACEs study was about some different events that influence your childhood, and from that they saw long-term health impacts, from anywhere from risky behavior, at risk behavior of lots of drugs, drinking to excess, things like that, to
Right.
lots of sexual partners, lots of different things like that, financial instability, housing instability, um, long-term health instability with heart attacks, strokes, things like that. So from that, they boil down to that the more ACEs you have, the more traumatic experiences you have as a kid, the the higher likelihood you are to have a longer term health impact.
Hmm.
So from there, and this statistic is held true for a lot of the follow-up follow-up screenings and studies, is that 1 in 4 people just walking around, not even just your kids, 1 in 4 have an ACE score of some sort, have an adverse childhood experience that's going to affect them, right?
Hmm.
So the problem with that, not the problem, but the thing that we don't always hear about is that the ACEs studies generally are reflective of the larger, wider population, right? Your Caucasian people, um, who have a different experience than some of the different minority and underserved and privileged populations, right?
Uh-huh.
So we know that in some of those from specific studies, they have a higher rate of trauma than the larger white population reports. So even though it says 1 in 4, chances are you're going to have a lot more than that. So you might have 2 out of 4. I always combine that statistic with talking about, from my counselor and the mental health background, that 1 in 5 kids are going to experience a mental health challenge impact of some sort through their school age lives. So when we put all of that together, if you have a standard classroom of 25, you're
Hmm.
probably going to have anywhere from 3 to 5 kids who are going to have some very classic behaviors that come out that you can see are fairly traumatic in nature. You're going to have some low frustration tolerance, low emotional regulation, low
Right.
emotional IQ. Like they just don't understand that what they say is hurting or challenging or things like that, or how to navigate certain relationships. But what I always tell you is that you probably have 10. If you have 5, you probably have
Yeah.
10, right? So you're talking not quite half your class, but fairly close, because the
Hmm.
other 5 have some trauma of some sort, and they have a different reaction to it. And that can sometimes be the differences in the trauma types, right?
Hmm.
Classic abuse comes out in different ways than, um, let's say, a car crash comes out, or you know, if there was a natural disaster of some sort. Like I live in the Midwest, and so I've had kids that have been in tornadoes. So when the
Hmm.
tornado sirens go off is when their trauma starts hitting.
Right.
So how does that affect you in the classroom is it can be anywhere from seeing those aggressive behaviors, things that you see on like TikTok and Instagram feeds of, somebody throwing a chair across the room, or it can
Hmm.
be very much your shut down kiddo who just goes into a ball, protects themselves, and withdraws to, puts their armor up and you can't get through, to even your fawning students. And that's one of the responses that we talk about with stress now, a little bit more often than we used to, is fawning. You either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And the fawning is where your students are overly amenable. They're very codependent. They're very much people pleasing to try and
Hmm.
stop stress or try to. Um, I've even had kids describe it. I try to pay for it with good deeds so that the bad things don't happen to me.
Hmm.
And so that's also another example that you might see of stress and trauma. And trauma causes stress, obviously, because that's a stressful event. Um, but you're going to have the way it gets nuanced is everybody's ability to cope developmental level wise. If you're working with kindergarteners who are
Hmm.
a lot of fun and have motors that just go, that's going to be a different response than you have from your 12-year-old or your 14-year-old or a 17-year-old, right? And
Right.
different cultures have different ways of dealing with it too, depending on if their attitudes toward emotions and feelings, attitudes toward who you can go to, how family structures are like that. So you'll see a lot of different behaviors from trauma and stress depending on all those different factors, which is hard to kind of reconcile as a teacher, right? Like
Yeah.
not just about getting that math and that reading score anymore, and and throwing some science in to pepper around, right? So that makes it tough. But generally, I would say 10 out of your 25 have something of some sort. Um, that you'll see anywhere from aggressive behavior, hard time making friendships and navigating those,
Mhm.
to shutting down, crying, or I always look for what we call atypical affect in the mental health world is their emotion reaction doesn't necessarily match what they're doing,
Mm.
right? Somebody who
Mhm.
gets a break, I've seen a kid who broke his arm and was just laughing, right?
Yeah.
Because his system was hardwired in a little bit different way that was
Right.
the reaction that helped him feel better. Um,
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true. And we definitely have had a lot of kids who do the flight. Like they're bolting out of that classroom. They're bolting out of the school building. And they don't just stop there. They're still running. I have a coworker who at the time had followed because by this time he's not running anymore. He's off of school grounds. He's in the neighborhood, but they still followed him to make sure he was safe. Um, because sometimes when they live close to the school, like they know how to get home. They're just going home. They knew that that would be at that moment their safe place to get to. But so these are definitely real effects that we see really on a daily. Um, and some kids just the crying, that just release, not knowing. And like you said, the aggressiveness, either towards adults or peers or both. Um, yeah. And so, what are some ways that the teachers then can engage or help these students come back, regulate, and do their best to be a learner in the classroom?
I would say first thing, find out as much information about it as you can. So I always, and I think I mentioned this before, National Child Traumatic Stress Network has a ton of things. The NEA has a lot of good resources on trauma-informed schools. And then and I will get the link to you about ACEs Aware, which is specifically about ACEs. It has a lot of just general information about trauma and how that happens and what the long-term influence is. So the more informed you are, the better off you know about how this is going to affect everything. Okay. Now, how everybody goes through it's a little bit different, but you at least have more information about it because sometimes we don't go into the fact that as a kid, your frontal lobe isn't fully formed or activated, so you can't screen out some things. That means your resilience isn't as high as when you're a 30-year-old.
Right.
So physically, you're not screening out as much stimuli. So then that means hot highway express right to your amygdala, and then that activates, and then the cortisol and the adrenaline dump and everything that happens from there, and the dopamine rush so that you don't feel any pain. Um, we don't talk about that as much, which we need to, because that means that some of
Right.
our kids are in a constant higher state of awareness because their amygdala is overdeveloped and overactivated. So some of our kids, if I was to say on a scale of 100, 100 being that you're fully activated, there's a bear coming after you. I'm throwing back to my Colorado roots. You're coming down the mountain. There's a bear behind you,
Yeah.
right? You're at 100% activated. Well, some of our kids live at a 90, no matter what. Like that's their
Yeah.
basal, their resting state is at like a 90% aware of activation. And others, it can be 60%. So it takes a lot more to activate them up, right?
Hmm.
So having that awareness is a big thing, having that education and that informed aspect of yourself. The next one is to start integrating some different practices through throughout just your classroom, having a safe corner. A lot of people are like, well, now I got to take a corner. I don't have any room, right? There's no room. There never is in schools, right? It doesn't have to be. I've seen some very elaborate ones which are pretty awesome. I would have lived in those myself, trying
Right.
to like any work. Um, but it doesn't have to be anything super special. It just has to be an area where they can be kind of by themselves. they can reset by themselves. Because some kids, when their armor goes up, they don't want anybody else. It doesn't matter if you're their person. They don't want their people there because they have to be there for themselves. And so that's some of the ways that you can start tailoring the environment to feed this protective emotion, this protective action, because even the aggression is a protective factor for this kid.
Mhm.
If I come home and I'm abused every day, if I'm aggressive and people leave me alone,
Mm.
that's it. I wouldn't say it was necessarily healthy, but that's a protective factor that they've developed to
Yeah.
try and keep themselves healthier than the abuse that they might experience.
Hmm.
So knowing that, knowing what the kids' triggers are, getting to know your students, making that relationship connection, right? Um, One of the things that in mental health land that we talk about is the attachment style of people. Like if you're anxious, if you're avoidant, if you have a secure attachment, if you have a disorganized attachment, how you attach to other people can be influenced by trauma and stress. And so what we talk about is having secure attachments and having other people demonstrate and model security in their relationships with healthy boundaries. That means being encouraging, but holding the line of like what are some very real boundaries of like you don't get to call people things, you don't get to hurt people, some very just straightforward and understandable and predictable boundaries that can help your students. So you're demonstrating to them that you are a safe, predictable person that they can go to when they need to.
Right.
Um, so sometimes with our younger kids, that means having those classroom contracts, charters, having those expectations and making it black and white on the board. For some of those older students, that means, setting the line and holding on to it. You don't necessarily need to have that whole charter on the board where everybody signs, but having a predictable set of routines that they can go off of can be helpful. So those are a few different ways. Some are just how you classroom manage. Are you going to call on somebody or are you going to call for volunteers? Knowing that Johnny, if you call out Johnny, Johnny may not have it right then. His anxiety and his trauma might start activating up because he feels on the spot. That's
Right.
not a fun feeling. So are you going to just ask for volunteers or are you going to be able to give them an out? Like, hey, I'll come back to you. So different things like that can be just different ways to like have that classroom management to to work around some of those things and give kids an out, give kids an ability to work with their own in a safe and secure way.
Hmm. Yeah. Back to the calm corner or quiet space. Um, I agree. I've seen some like they're really cool and they've got cool posters and fidgets and a cool, seat cushion to sit on, little timers. And then I've also seen some classes, they just have a desk, you know, set apart from the rest of the class, and there's a timer and maybe just a couple other things, but they know that that's still a safe space that they can go to. And I think it's great too that teachers also incorporate the whole class and giving them the opportunity. They may not be, from a trauma background, but, all of us had bad days, hard days, and be able to give them that space to go there and kind of refocus and calm and come back to learning, I think is important as well. And like these are great things that you can do that don't, like you said, take up a lot of space, take up a lot of time. Another way I've seen teachers handle is journaling and giving them the opportunity to write it out. And that could be in the quiet corner or, drawing paper there, letting them draw. We had a lot of kids, mostly the foster kids would want to draw.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very general statement, but the some students that I worked with, they like to draw and some of them were very interesting drawings, but just giving them an outlet somewhere safe in your classroom will make a huge difference for them and being consistent with it because I've also seen where, like you said, kids are back there, they're just chilling and the teacher's not even recognizing they've been back there for like 10 minutes. Like, okay, Johnny, like let's get back to work, your calm time is over. Um, and kind
We
of
do have to get
holding
a
to
little
those
bit done, right?
expectations too, yeah, is important. But those are great strategies to have and use. Um, I think, like you said, a couple things like to avoid is that re-traumatizing. Um, and I know, like you said, you don't, especially for next year, you're not sure what students you're going to get, where they're coming from, what's happened over the summer. But what are some ways that we can help or the teachers can avoid that re-traumatizing for their students?
That's a good question. The thing that I'm always kind of blown away is like sometimes we don't end up talking to each other.
Oh, yeah,
So that third grade teacher just sometimes doesn't talk to the second grade teacher, or when you're
right.
getting a new batch of freshmen, look at if you have a student information system that has some notes in it that you're able to access or look at some of the different parts, like sometimes we can know that of different things, like with if you have IEPs, if you have MTSS or RTI logs or
Right.
504s, sometimes they'll have a communication piece in there that tells you a little bit about that. But if you get a kiddo, first couple of days and you're like, there's something going on, yeah, don't be afraid to talk to each other. Talk to the counselor, talk to your admin. They might have a little bit more information about that.
Hmm.
So communicate with each other. In my mind, always makes sense, and that means across the board. So, as a school counselor, if a kiddo's on a team, I remember being in middle school. If you went to their A team, or if they're on B team and you had a concern about them, then talking to the different teachers about it, because someone might see something here, someone might have success over here because of something,
Right.
right? Like I still remember one day when you were talking about Calm Corner just now that this one gal, and I can't remember how exactly where she stored these things, but she had like sit pillows or cushions. So
Uh-huh.
their first half of their class time was in desks to get the main part of the learning done, the main lecture part that she might have to do, and then the rest they were allowed to push their desks back, and everybody had a cushion, and they just sat. They're an iPad team, so they sat on their iPads and worked on the
Oh,
assignment or worked on the project or whatever.
right.
So I had one kid who went from yelling and cussing and cursing and leaving the class right before to knowing that his next schedule piece was her class and turning it around and being like, oh God, I gotta get my stuff in gear. I gotta calm myself. I gotta work through this so I can get in there because I don't want to miss that time with her.
Yeah.
So being that person is important. But also being flexible with it because that was at a middle school level, not necessarily at like a third grade level, which we kind of tend to think of. So it can be doable. Your own flexibility has to come into factor.
Right.
Sometimes your own trauma, your own attachments, your own things are things that you have to be aware of that can help with how you reach these kids and how you start balancing it out with them, right?
Right. Because I'm sure, some of it could be, triggering for them as well. And knowing like where is your safe space? Who's that friend? Or is it retail therapy? I mean, that was always I love doing that. Um, going out with friends after work, you and your spouse or partner, going out to dinner and just being able to, to talk about it and share that. You definitely have to take care of yourself as well so that you can be there for your students and helping them. So that also, I agree, is important for them to know. What are their triggers? How do they react to those stressful situations? Because I know like we all have our limits and it's not the best place to lose it when you're in the middle of class. And unfortunately, I've been in some classrooms and where the teacher has kind of lost it. And one of the students I was with, unfortunately, he was with an abusive parent. And man, as soon as that teacher started raising her voice, he just like, you can feel that tension. And, I was able to just kind of reassure him, like, we're okay, she's having a moment. But anyways, to realize, like, again, your behavior definitely affects your students as well. And being able to, for you to regulate is super important. Um, what is something else? Like, okay, so role modeling was one way.
Mhm.
I know with some of our training, one of the most important things they teach us is being calm, being the calm in their storm.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that, Andrew?
As much as you can. Their stuff's going to affect you, just like we were just talking about. As
Yeah.
much as you can, having that CPI, Crisis Prevention Institute. There's they train all over the place, across the
Yeah.
nation. They call it rational detachment, right? Being able to realize and hold that this isn't about me,
Right.
but this person's going through something. They're throwing all those curse words. They're going to tell you how bad you are, why you're
Yep.
that way, how long you're going to be that way, and all those different things. They'll
Yeah.
strip you down pretty quick, but that's not about you. And that's the hard part is like they're throwing it at you. It's really not about you. But sometimes our people hit
Feels
the right
like it.
buttons of
Yeah.
our own things, so it is going to affect you. So being able to be aware of your own reactions is hard, but it's important because you are that surrogate parent, right? Not only legally within local parentis, but also you're that emotional safety that some of the kids may not have anywhere else. Doesn't mean that they're not going to push and fight against it because sometimes normal doesn't feel normal for kids. However, the way we mitigate that is having that safe, secure bond as much as possible when you start feeling yourself, getting activated, or there's a topic that just is a no-go for you, that's okay. That doesn't mean you're any less of a person or a teacher or anything. That makes you more of a
Yeah.
human that you know that, and that you're willing to feel that. However, that also means that you might need to tag out and communicate with your team, your admin team, your support team, your buddy classroom, whatever setup you have, of being
Mm.
like, I need to step out. I need some help with this because I'm about to lose it. And so I'm gonna take my break. And if you feel like it's just, that's just one of those chaotic days and everything's over, that's a little different. I would say even model that to the kids. I've had kindergarten and first grade teachers that have talked about that. Like, today's been a rough day. I'm gonna take my break right
Yeah.
now, and this is what I'm gonna do. So I want you guys to do this so that you guys have that break too.
Right.
uh, you can model handling like overwhelm and disappointment. Those are natural feelings that some people and some kids don't feel like it's safe to express. But you can also model how to handle those things too. It's when you feel like you're gonna lose it or you're gonna blow your volcano from a Julia Cook book. My mouth is a volcano about to blow. Then that's when you need to tag out for somebody who can be that
Yeah.
calm, rationally detached, that very you know, that calming presence for you as well as for the kids and that predictable nature. Um, so there's a couple parts of that because once our calm can be infectious, just like our anxiety, our aggression, our
Mhm.
sadness can be infectious too. And it'll frustrate some kids sometimes because what do you do with somebody who's just calm and saying, "Look, dude, I know it's hard. I know you're mad. I'm
Right.
here for you. You let me know what you need.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, dude. Yes, you're mad. You're showing me you're mad. I'm
Right.
here for you. Let me know what you need." And that consistent calm presence, that can be hard because they may not have that anywhere else. So if you feel like it's activating you, or if you feel like you can't provide that, then let's get somebody who can. It doesn't mean you're any less of anything because things happen and you're a person. You get to be a person no matter what. It may not feel like you're a person as a teacher or as an educator. You get to be. You have permission. Smith said so. But the other part is that gives us the responsibility to provide that calm, predictable, safe area for them. If we can't be that safety, we have to try and make sure that as an adult we take care of that for them too.
Agreed. And I think, like you said, it really does take a team. And whether it's your, grade level team, like you said, admin, mental health team, we have a behavior team. whatever it is to be able, and I've done that. More than once. I can look at my coworker, Miss Rita, and say, yeah, I gotta go. And she's good. And, vice versa. She's done the same where she'll look at me and I'm like, okay, go, and we've got it covered. And so definitely, and then that's communicating too. For us, it's being able to come back and reevaluate once, we've had a big dysregulation with a student to come back and learn from that. Was there something better we could have done? Was there something else we could have offered that student? And try and figure out, because it's a constant learning process. Like you said, trauma isn't just always a one-time event, it's a process. And helping these students get to this regulation, where they know they can come back and be safe and be calm and ready to learn
And be welcomed back.
and be, oh gosh, that's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah. That
That's
takes sometimes
huge.
that takes a lot out of the person welcoming you back, but it's
Yes.
amazing to do that for somebody.
Oh man, that makes such a difference because, and that's again back to that connection. I can think of a lot of our students, unfortunately, that have come out of the room, they've taken a break, they're ready to come back and learn. And sometimes it's no acknowledgement at all. Or other times, the teacher is rehashing and bringing back up again what happened with that student. And now, of course, that student is, all upset and frustrated again. Now they don't want to go back in class. And it's like,
We just
we
had
were
you in
right
principal.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, okay,
Like,
let's go
no.
back. Yeah.
But being able to be the safe, caring adult for your students is huge. And again, it doesn't have to be like, we know you're not therapists, we know you're not doing therapy, but integrating these little emotional intelligent moments throughout the day really makes a difference. And giving them and showing them, like you said, they're normal too, just like you are. We all have bad days. We are stressed out. We've all, kind of been through it. But helping your students process through is takes time. Takes time.
But it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally worth it. And again, like we're not going to turn everything around and change the whole family life, but to again, just that caring adult. What is it? Josh Ship, he's a youth speaker, has said every student is one caring adult from success. And even Dr. Bruce Perry will say that from one of his books, something like a dog. Was it the
Oh, the
dog?
boy who was raised as a dog.
The boy who was raised as a dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how one caring adult made a difference in some of those kids that he interviewed. And it's just amazing because you have a very powerful position to continue to impact not only obviously academically, but emotionally and for their future and teaching them these skills. And especially at the elementary level, like I really feel like we're helping lay that foundation for when they get to middle school and high school and all the emotional hormones going on over there. What do you think about that?
There's gonna be some. No, I can't agree more. I always the analogy I always use is word gas stations on their road of life. And sometimes they
Yeah.
stop in for a brief little period and then they go on their merry way and everything's good. And sometimes they take a different route because
Yeah.
of how you've been there for them. So the road, their path doesn't end with us, but it can change with us for sure.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Do you have any other closing thoughts or ideas for us?
No, just one thing, like even I think it was Carl Jung, who was a pretty big psychologist. You could learn all the different techniques, all the information, but really just being a person to another person
Yeah,
is the biggest part, one soul to another, and that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to help others.
right. Exactly. Because we're all in this together. So,
Absolutely.
thanks again, Andrew, for being here, sharing your expertise with us. And I want to encourage you guys, like, what is it that you're going to set up for your classroom for next year that will help those hurting, struggling students that you will have in your classroom? Excuse me. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Thanks again, Andrew.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate your support. And if I have encouraged you, motivated you to continue to learn, to support your students, even better, to help them strive in your classroom, please leave a review, hit that subscribe button so that others can see they can learn and grow here as well. Thank you.